Welcome to Say More from Boston Globe Opinion. I'm Shirley Leung. The Karen Reed case started out relatively small, followed closely by a local group of diehards. But now it feels like everyone is paying attention. Reed was on trial for killing her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe. Prosecutors say she intentionally hit him with her SUV while driving drunk in a snowstorm. Reed's lawyers say she was framed. But after a grueling 8-week trial,
Judge Cannoni, despite our rigorous efforts,
the jury couldn't reach a consensus.
The deep division is not due to a lack of effort or diligence, but rather a sincere adherence to our individual principles and moral convictions.
The judge declared a mistrial. We talked about the trial in an earlier episode. Check it out. Now, I want to know where we go from here and what lessons we learned along the way. Today, I'm joined again by Boston Globe reporter Sean Cotter. Also here is Globe Opinion columnist Joan Vennochi. We're all squished together in the Globe's cozy podcast studio. Sean, Joan, welcome to Say More.
Happy to be here.
Nice to be here.
So, Sean, you've been on this case from the very beginning, often waking up at the crack of dawn, right, to cover this case.
That's right.
To scoot down to Dedham, right? So it's been a long couple of months for you?
It's been a long couple of months for a lot of people, I think. Emotions run high at that trial, and it's been long and with a lot of twists and turns, a grueling course of events.
So what happened was that after 8 weeks of a trial, there was a mistrial. So what does a mistrial mean? What does that mean?
In this case, the judge declared a mistrial because the jurors couldn't agree. They said they were hopelessly deadlocked, and so further deliberation would be futile, to use their word. And so then the judge declared a mistrial, which essentially brings it back to right before the trial started. And the prosecution has vowed to try the case again. So now both sides are determining the next steps.
Joan, what was running through your mind during this trial?
So I wasn't really surprised that the jury seemed to be unable to come to a verdict because I think it kind of reflected the way most people were looking at this. They, on one hand, you didn't want the defendant to be able to get away with something. On the other hand, there are elements of a crime that have to be proven. Second-degree murder, they had to show intent. I don't think that the prosecution really did a good job or didn't have the evidence to show that kind of intent. So you were kind of torn between saying there should be accountability, but it's not murder. There should be accountability, but is it something else? Is it vehicular manslaughter? And so it seems to me perfectly credible that a room full of people would be unable to come to some kind of agreement about that.
I mean, given what we heard in the case, it seemed like the logical outcome probably was a mistrial. I mean, when you followed the case, I don't see how any jury could have made a decision without reasonable doubt, right?
Well, particularly on the murder charge. I mean, to show the element that she deliberately backed into or drove into John O'Keefe with the intent of killing him. I wasn't in the courtroom like you were, Sean, but it was hard to, sort of glean that from what I watched on TV or, read in the press. So that element of intent seemed to be missing. As for the, other charges against her, it really wasn't clear. It's at the end of it what really had happened. Other than that, there was a dead police officer. And a big conspiracy theory about a group of people that was somehow involved in a cover-up.
And at one point, early on, there was discussion of a dog, right? That maybe a dog, a German Shepherd named Chloe might have killed John O'Keefe. Sean, what happened to the dog? Why didn't we hear more about the dog?
There was testimony about the dog, including from a person who approached the defense after reading about the dog in the Boston Globe. and said that she thought that based on her experience as somebody who worked with police canines and as an ER doctor, that she thought that the bite marks on O'Keefe's arm looked like they came from an attack from a dog. But so there was a lot of testimony about the whereabouts of Chloe, the German Shepherd. Allegedly, she's up in Vermont. She's been rehomed. But I mean, this sort of encapsulates this case, right? That there's like a million different threads you can go down. You could talk for an hour about the dog. You can talk for an hour about the timing of Google search results. It's been all over the place. And I think that's one of the reasons why people are interested in it, right?
Wasn't there also some testimony that there was no canine DNA on any of the clothing that was submitted to investigators? Although the investigators aren't exactly, the most credible people we've ever heard from.
Yeah, there was testimony about no canine DNA found on John O'Keefe, yeah.
And another bombshell, you'd think that there couldn't be more bombshells in this case, but you'd think. Karen Reed's lawyers recently filed a motion in court saying that some jurors approached them after the trial to let them know that the jury was actually unanimous on the most serious charge of murder. And they agreed which means they agreed she was innocent. So, Sean, what do you make of all of this?
I don't really know what to make of this at this point. This isn't something you see a lot where the defense says, oh, they agreed internally and that she was not guilty, but they didn't actually say it in court. They didn't fill out the forms and reach a verdict. And so the defense is saying, therefore, she should be not tried again on that charge. There's not really any precedent for that. I'm interested to see the prosecution's response, and I'm interested to see how the judge rules on this.
I'm going to speculate that the defense loses on that because they can say that jurors came to them and said that there was this 12-0 vote or polling. But from what I understand, unless you actually record, check the box on the slip, record it, and then bring it into the courtroom, there is some case law that shows that it's not considered a verdict.
Yeah. I mean, I was just talking to a retired judge yesterday. I was writing a story, like doing analysis of this
I'll talk to
motion.
that guy too, yeah.
Yeah. And he was saying that, like, look, there's no verdict until there's a verdict. And just sort of speculation talk in the jury room is not more than that. But Reed has very aggressive and skilled defense counsel, and they have tried a lot of different things in this case and had a measure of success with some of them. I'm interested to see the prosecution's response, and I'm interested to see how the judge rules on this.
So Sean, given what we know about the trial and the evidence that's come out already, does it even make sense for prosecutors to retry Karen? I mean, it's kind of mind-blowing to imagine going through all of this again.
There's sort of going to be a lot of pressure on each side now to figure out what they do next. But the prosecution has been pretty resolute in saying, yes, we are going to retry this case. This is a killing of a police officer, and this is who we believe did it, they say. They are able to recalibrate now a little bit if they want. That does happen ahead of sometimes, like if there's a mistrial, then the second time around, a lot of times it does favor the prosecution because they're able to be more ready for some of the holes the defense tries to poke in their case. That happened in this same courthouse in front of the same judge in the murder of a Weymouth police officer just in the past year. There was a mistrial, and then they came back 6 months later and they convicted.
I think they will prosecute her again. I just wonder if they'll bring the murder charge again. Because throughout this trial, a lot of observers with more legal experience than we have were saying that it was overcharged from the start. And had they charged her with vehicular homicide, had they charged her with manslaughter, it never would have gotten the wave of publicity that it got. She's on trial for murder. And that, again, the intent part of it, they didn't show it the first time around. I don't see how they'd show more of it the second time around.
More of my conversation with Sean and Joan after this short break. Hi, it's Shirley. If you're enjoying Say More, there's another podcast I want to recommend, especially if climate change, global conflicts, and an upcoming election are making you feel like we're on the brink of disaster. What Could Go Right is hosted by Progress Network founder Zachary Karabell and executive director Emma Varvaloucas. The hosts sit down with expert guests to discuss the world's most pressing issues without resorting to pessimism or despair. Instead, they look back at how far society has come and look forward to how we can achieve an even brighter future. Tune in to hear interviews with guests like Pulitzer Prize winner Charles Duhigg and CNN host Fareed Zakaria, and a weekly dose of positive news from across the globe. Listen to What Could Go Right wherever you get your podcasts.
Sometimes things in the world of technology are complicated and need careful explaining. Sometimes they just need a little hard truth.
I don't think anyone is going to buy a banana with crypto at any point in the foreseeable future.
I'm Lizzie O'Leary, the host of Slate's What Next TBD, your clear-eyed guide to technology, power, and the future. Friday and Sunday, wherever you get your podcasts.
Joan, you and some other columnists at the Globe have been writing a lot about the idea that the state police were actually on trial here. Can you talk about what the case revealed about the police?
Well, what the case revealed about the police was nothing very good. Was there anything worse than what came out about Trooper Proctor, the lead investigator, who in his private text said misogynist, sexist, really disgusting things about the defendant, Karen Reed, who he was looking at as a suspect in this case. And he's now been suspended without pay.
That's right.
And there's a lot of pressure right now on Governor Maura Healey to do something, do something means impose a level of professionalism on the state police.
Yeah, the state police is at a little bit of a crossroads right now. They've had an interim leader for the past, I think, year and a half. And so it's now on the governor and her team to appoint somebody who's going to lead that organization that has faced a lot of controversy over the past several years, up to and including this.
Right. They've had a lot of scandals. They had the overtime scandal, forgetting the other ones. Maybe you can show me. The
commercial driver's license one.
Oh, that's right.
The one with the judge's daughter. It's
right. So, I mean, if it were just one trooper who misbehaved, that would be one thing. But there has been a pattern of kind of misconduct and lack of professionalism over there. And I think it is really going to be interesting to see what Governor Healey does about it.
And Trooper Proctor, I mean, he's also involved in another high-profile murder case, right?
The Anna Walsh murder.
Yes, he is. The Anna Walsh murder case, yeah.
Tell me about that.
It's another one that's down the South Shore, and in that case, man Brian Walsh is charged with killing his wife Anna and, dismembering her and disposing of her body. It hasn't had the same type of controversy as like the Reed case because there's not like another narrative around it, but that it was a high-profile case. It made the headlines a lot when it happened shortly after New Year's last year.
I think, Proctor's role in the Karen Reed case hurts his credibility going forward and hurts, his credibility in any investigation he's involved in. And if I were, the defense lawyer, I'd be asking to see his private texts. Because if he said that about Karen Reed, who knows what he says about other defendants he's investigating.
Joan, you wrote about how the Karen Reed case reminded you about the murder trial of O.J. Simpson, and, complete with high-priced lawyers from L.A., shoddy police work, a media circus. So how does looking back at O.J. help us make sense of what we're seeing with this Karen Reed trial?
You're dating me here, Shirley, but okay.
Me too.
Okay.
30 years, 1994.
Is that when it was? Well, the first thing that comes to mind is just the idea of, I think the O.J. case was the first where we're all gathered around a television set watching this thing play out.
Yeah.
And it was
from the white Bronco down the highway, right?
Right. I mean, it was a nationwide obsession. And I could remember being in the old newsroom at Morrissey Boulevard when the verdict came down and just just the gasps and, the reaction to the whole thing. So, I mean, just that the television issue part of it really, brings back memories, I guess. And also, I mean, as you said, I mean, there were specific things about the O.J. case that seemed to play out again here. The police lost control of the crime scene. The defense claimed that some of the evidence was planted. Here they were saying that the rear taillight really wasn't cracked. They did it, I think, something like that. They placed it on the ground. There was a haphazard investigation. And, I mean, who could forget, if the glove don't fit, you must acquit. Now,
do we have a line like that from this one?
Well, somebody,
where's Chloe?
Yeah,
I don't know.
I put in one of my stories a couple months ago that somebody online had in their bio, if the arm was bit, you must acquit, or something like that. And
that's
so
a reference to Chloe the dog?
That was a reference to
I
Chloe
love
the dog,
that.
tying it into the O.J.
But
case.
the arm was not bit, so she was not acquitted. It was just a mistrial.
Well,
we shall see.
There's diverging opinions, I guess.
And Joan, you wrote another column about, and other columnists have also written about the victim, John O'Keefe, and his family. He was took care of his niece and nephew, and who are quite young still. And how John O'Keefe was kind of lost in this circus of a case. So talk to me about that.
Right. Well, Yvonne Abraham wrote about the two children of his sister who had, who he was caring for and have been now kind of re-orphaned, I guess.
And they were also on trial. They also had to testify.
They testified,
yes,
so that had to be really difficult. But, I mean, it isn't the most original thought, I guess, but it just seemed, I was speaking with Dan Connolly, the former Suffolk DA, and he said, O'Keefe, the police officer, became a bit player in the trial that was supposed to, bring justice.
Sean, you've been talking to Karen Reed supporters.
Mm-hmm.
How are they reacting to this idea that John O'Keefe was lost in the trial?
I mean, look, like if you talk to the folks who are demonstrating outside wearing pink and being out there in support of Karen Reed, like they think that they are on the side of justice, and they think that, like, they would argue that, like, oh, she didn't kill him, so that wouldn't be justice, and that we should find whoever did in their view, and that's what they think would be the best for him.
Okay, so we're all waiting for the next shoe to drop, which is this court date, right? Where the judge brings everyone back in, and we get to find out, will there be another trial? So what's going through your mind going forward? Joan, what do you think is going to happen?
Well, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with the motion filed about whether or not there was a verdict or not. I mean, I think that that's going to be, go up to maybe the SJC, right? Yep. The highest court in Massachusetts, which would rule on the issue of the law as to whether there was a verdict or not. And that, if that happens, that's going to delay any trial.
That's right. I mean, if this goes to the SJC, and I don't know how far the appeals will go, but I suspect that no matter what happens, there'll be pretty serious appeals. I mean, if this goes before the full SJC, this could take like months or more before we even get to the stage of thinking about the next trial.
And then I was also thinking, it was already hard to seat a jury, right? And now that there's been this 8 weeks of wall-to-wall coverage, I mean, do you think that they might move the case out of Norfolk County?
One of the things that they could do before moving out of Norfolk County is they could bring in the jury from somewhere else. In other trials in Norfolk County recently that were high profile, once they brought in a jury from Worcester County and once they brought in a jury from Bristol County. And so they bus them in from somewhere else. That could be one way. That would require somebody, like one side or the other, to ask for that. As same with a change of venue, that would require somebody to ask for that. And so we'll see. At this point, nobody has asked for that, and nor did they before this trial.
Mm-hmm. Sean, I know you can't answer this question because you're on the news side of the operation, but that's why I can ask Joan. So,
very good.
So what happens next? Do you think Karen Read is going to be guilty, not guilty? Can there be another? Do you think there will be another mistrial?
If there is another trial, I think there's a possibility she will be found guilty of a lesser charge. Definitely not of murder. Apart from, guilt or innocence, I wonder what life will be like for Karen Read. She was such a celebrity. She had this following. Honestly,
and she wasn't before. I mean, she was not nobody knew who Karen Read was.
I mean, honestly, you tell me, you were there. She looked like she was enjoying some of it.
I think that, it's tough to say somebody was enjoying during their murder trial, but she certainly embraced the fact that all these people were there for her.
I just wonder what life will be like for her not being, part of this big theatrical event with a coterie of lawyers and dressed in her professional garb. And also, she had a life before. She worked.
She was a financial analyst for Fidelity, and she taught a college class at Bentley.
So, where do you go from here after what she just went through? How hard will it be to get another job? Just like basic things like that. I think, it's sad.
Well, I'm thinking about what life will be like for Sean. If there is another trial, Karen Read trial, are you ready for Karen Read 2.0?
We'll see when it happens, whether that's in months or years or whatever.
Sean Cotter is a courts reporter for the Boston Globe. Joan Vennochi is a columnist for the Globe Opinion section. Thank you both for joining me on Say More.
Thank you for having me.
It was nice to be here, Shirley.
Today's episode was produced by Anna Kusmer. Our editor is Jim Dow. Our engineer is Zuzair Ahmed. Our music is from APM Music. If you like the show, please follow us and leave us a review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can email us at saymore@globe.com. I'm Shirley Leung. Thanks for listening.